See, it's on.
Yeah.
That means the camera's...
Really?
Yeah.
God, I didn't know you went to filmmaking school.
Yeah, that's what the red light means. And welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen, to the Rowdy.com Big Three. Sitting alongside Jerome Buzz Cutler, I'm Leonard Bass. Masters...
Now, wait a minute, Bass.
What?
Is it true that today is the anniversary of your birth?
No, yeah, that was yesterday.
Oh, well, never mind then.
But thank you anyway. And it was a pretty good day. I sat around all day and watched TV and sat out in the yard and all that. And contemplated the Subway Fresh Fit 600 from Phoenix, which we ran on Saturday night.
600 kilometers.
600 kilometers, an extra 63 laps, plus a couple, actually, due to the green-white checker finish there. And it was a pretty interesting end to the race. What are today's questions,
Well, while you were out last week, Buck and I contemplated whether or not after Bristol and Martinsville, 4 tires would be the call at the end of the race.
Right.
And we said, well, yeah, it looks like that probably will be the new SOP.
Especially after the nationwide race.
Yet, it wasn't.
No, and it depends really on how many guys go for 2. And Kyle Busch taking 4, Jimmy Johnson taking 4. It was not the right call just because so many guys took 2, and there just wasn't enough time to get back through traffic. I think you could be deceived a little bit by Martinsville, especially with what Danny Hamlin was able to do there.
Right.
That was, to me, a very unusual thing. As we said afterwards, the call worked out, but maybe if you had to make that call again, you'd maybe go for the 2 tires. So.
Well, and I think there was another variable that we didn't anticipate, yet probably could have, which is the cooler temperatures, which made 2 a more viable option. I think Ryan Newman said earlier in the day, under the heat of the sun, 2 wasn't very good. But as the track cooled down, you had more grip, and 2 could get the job done.
Well, it did, and it helps to have that cushion of guys behind you with 2 tires. I mean, that's really the determining factor. How much of a cushion do I have? I'm slower than the guys with 4 behind me, but if I have a cushion of a bunch of guys with 2, I've only got to hold them off for a couple laps. That's definitely doable. Plus, if you look at the call Dave Rogers made for Kyle Busch, remember that call did not work out at Martinsville for Kyle. He made a 4-tire call at Martinsville. That did not work out for him. He ended up wrecking back there. So that's another factor. Plus, if you'll recall, Cutler.
I will.
You know, they were scanning Jimmy Johnson. They said after the race, well, Jimmy took 4, and it makes me go back to this old question that we have.
Are they in Jimmy's head?
Is Jimmy Johnson having a disproportionate effect just because of his prowess, especially at Phoenix?
Here's the irony of Jimmy taking 4. In his pre-race press conference down in Phoenix, he said he never makes tire calls, he never makes pit calls. That's Chad's job. He doesn't want to get involved in it. He always turns out to be wrong when he tries. Yet, Jimmy is the one who called for 4 tires and said it was the first time in a really long time he had made any sort of call from the car.
And not a bad call. He got back to 3rd.
Yeah, it turned out to be the wrong call.
Right.
So,
I don't know.
Jimmy, you were probably right the first time, and you should just let Chad make those calls.
Let Chad make the calls.
Let's move on. Speaking of Jimmy Johnson, let's move on to Jeff Gordon. Right? 3rd at Martinsville.
Yeah.
2nd at Phoenix, competing for the win in the waning laps at both tracks. How does this bode for the future of the 2014?
I think it bodes well. You know, it's interesting that Jeff spun his tires on the restart. Kind of uncharacteristic of Jeff Gordon, but you look, everyone makes mistakes sometimes. The thing I liked about those runs for these guys is that the crew chief is now, Steve Letarte, has got him in position to win these races. Now, he hasn't done it yet. He hasn't done it yet this year. But if you put Jeff Gordon in that position enough times, he'll start to get the job done. And we know when it really matters is the last 10 races of the year. So if you're performing well now, you want to build on that. You want to start winning some races. But I think the chemistry looks very, very good over there. So I would be encouraged if I were a fan of 2014.
Which you're not.
I'm not a fan of anybody. Except the Biff.
And boy, didn't he look good.
Yeah, okay.
Here's my one caveat about the past 2 races for the 2014. Similar kind of tracks, on the shorter side, on the flatter side, and yes, he put together strong runs at both those tracks. The tracks leading up to Martinsville, however, he was not as strong at. So I'm looking to Texas, I'm looking to Talladega, I'm looking down the schedule, and if Jeff Gordon can continue to be in position to win at some of these downforce tracks, then maybe I'll tip my hat to him. But Martinsville and Phoenix...
You're not actually wearing a hat.
Well, but I mimed it. Or meme. as they say in France.
Well, I would not say that.
You know, Martinsville and Phoenix, a little too similar for me to sort of apply that good performance to the season moving forward.
Well, the only thing I'll say to that is, of course, the downforce tracks are the key to the season. But I'm looking at it more in terms of chemistry between crew chief and driver. I think the equipment at Hendrick Motorsports, you're going to be pretty confident you'll have the equipment there. So, you know, he won at Texas last year. He won this race last year. We're going there with a spoiler now, which is going to be very interesting. We'll talk about that later in the week.
Now, let's move on to issue number 3. Bassmasters, were you as surprised as Ryan Newman was that Tony GIbson has never been to victory lane as a crew chief?
Yes. Yes. I'm surprised. I'm shocked.
Look at all the people that he crew chiefed for. Mark Martin, Michael Waltrip, Dale Jr., Eric Almirola.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I can't think of any.
Well, I think you said the big names. I mean,
Eric Almirola.
Exactly. You went with the big names.
You know, but the thing about Tony GIbson is he was the car chief for Alan Kawicki. He was the car chief for 2 of Jeff Gordon's titles. But it just seems like it's just sort of shocking.
I agree. And, you know, it's been a while for Ryan Newman. You think of the year he had last year, you almost forget he didn't win a race last year.
Right.
It's been 77 races for Ryan Newman ever since the Daytona 500 a couple years ago. So that's quite a while. And, you know, this guy, he's doing this year what he did last year, which is start off slow and then come on. Tony Stewart, I'm not sure what's up with him, but Ryan, he had a very nice race there.
A slow start for Tony Stewart isn't alarming. Last year was actually the anomaly when he started off so strong.
Agreed.
You don't expect Tony Stewart to warm up
Sounds frustrated, though.
until the weather does. The other thing that's worth noting, besides it being Ryan Newman's first win since that 2008 Daytona 500, it was his first win for Stewart-Haas.
Yep.
It was also the first win ever for the number 39.
That's true.
And Junior Johnson had driven that car. David Pearson had driven that car. Dick Trickle. Dick Trickle.
Dick Trickle.
Leroy Yarborough.
Yeah.
So a lot of firsts. But when you see somebody like Tony GIbson, sort of a guy who's worked his way up through the ranks, a NASCAR lifer, get to victory lane for the first time, that's just a good story.
And interesting that he worked with Kawicki, because this was, of course, the place that was a big track for Kawicki. He got his first win here.
And Tony GIbson said Kawicki was the single most influential person in his career.
Alan Kawicki, very unusual individual. And there you have it. That's today's Rowdy.com Big 3 for another unusual individual. Jerome Buzz Cutler, I'm Bassmasters. We'll see you next time right here on the program.
We'll be right here.
Yes, we will. Sitting right here. Looking right there.
On this sofa.
Right.
It's really a car seat, but...
It is?
Yeah.
I love these old bench seats, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're pretty classy.
Rowdy.com. Say it like it is.
Say what like it is?
Rowdy.com.